जी बिस्मिल्लाह.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I, on behalf of the President and the entire CAS team, welcome you to the Roundtable conference titled Wings of Influence, Air Power's Role in Recent Conflicts. I would request you to switch your mobile phones to airplane mode. Now I would request your attention to the recitation from the Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤت الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب.
He gives wisdom to whom He wills, and whoever has been given wisdom has certainly been given much good, and none will remember except those of understanding.
صدق الله العظيم.
Let me introduce you to the esteemed speakers of today's Roundtable conference. Our keynote speaker for today is Air Marshal Zulfikar Ahmed Qureshi. Air Marshal Zulfikar Ahmed Qureshi is currently the president of the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Pakistan Air Force Academy. His illustrious career in the Pakistan Air Force started in 1988. His major staff and command appointments include Director General Joint Cantonment at the Joint Staff Headquarters, President of the Air War College Institute, Karachi, and Deputy Chief of the Air Staff Training at Air Headquarters. He is a recipient of the Hilal-e-Imtiaz Military. Air Marshal Zulfikar holds a master's degree in strategic studies, an MPhil in public policy and strategic security management, and is currently a PhD scholar. The speaker for the next segment is Air Commodore Fawad Zahir. Air Commodore Fawad Zahir is currently serving as Director, Office of the Research, Innovation and Commercialization at Air University. He has an extensive academic background involving research writing and teaching on contemporary security topics. Air Commodore Fawad Zahir has vast experience in matters pertaining to the evolving contours of warfare. His career in the Pakistan Air Force spans over 3.5 decades, and he has served as chief instructor at the Air War College. His educational background includes advanced degrees in security and war studies from the International College of Defense Studies, Beijing, National Defense University, and Qaid-e-Azam University. The last segment of the conference will be covered by Air Vice Marshal Nasir Wine. Air Vice Marshal Nasir Wine currently serves as the Director of Aerospace Warfare at CAS Islamabad. He has served in the Pakistan Air Force for over 33 years, during which he held various esteemed command, staff, and instructional appointments. He is a distinguished graduate of the Air War College and the National Defense University, as well as an alumnus of the Harvard University. I would now request the moderator to take over the proceedings of the day.
Next slide, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. This is going to be the outlook of the conference. Our keynote speaker, Air Marshal Zulfikar, will enlighten us on technological advancements and new operational concepts in air power. This conference has been subdivided into 3 segments, and the second segment would be covered by Air Commodore Fawad Zahir. He will talk about the case studies about the application of air power which has taken place in the last 2 years or so, recent conflicts, which would include Ukraine, Gaza, Syria, and Yemen's case studies. And in the last segment, I shall try and express my views on the future considerations that now, when the technological advancements have taken place, keeping in view the happenings as far as air power is concerned in last 2 years, what should be the future considerations? How the air power's strategies will have to be modified for especially the developing nations. There are two important, blank kar dijiye. There are two important objectives of this roundtable conference. One is that through these presentations, and more importantly, the discussion that takes place after the presentations, we at CAS would like to extract some of the key takeaways. On those key takeaways, we would like to research more and distribute those key takeaway points to the relevant quarters. The second objective of this conference is that by taking this opportunity from the esteemed speakers and the audiences, we would like that our researchers should build up their knowledge about the air power. And when they start working, especially in the aerospace warfare domain, technology, etc., they should have sufficient knowledge out of this discussion. With these objectives of the Roundtable Conference in mind, I would now request our keynote speaker, Air Marshal Zulfikar, to enlighten us on the subject.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege to be here at CAS, and I'm thankful to the President for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share my views on the subject as was displayed. Okay. The current global strategic landscape is characterized by the return of great power competition, which is an enduring condition and an infinite game. Such era is always infested with proxy wars, civil wars, and other kinds of irregular conflict. Nuclear weapons proliferation, evil non-state actors, terrorism, when combined with global trade, travel, and telecommunication, have already impacted the way we are living. The decoupling of economic and digital world order has already started to unfold new conflicts. Technology companies are strategically responding to these changes at a pace never seen before. The emerging global landscape is presenting new challenges to global security, and the emerging global landscape is presenting new challenges to the global security. The shifting power of dynamics, challenges posed by non-state actors, and asymmetric warfare, the weaponization of technology, and the prevalence of hybrid conflict is challenging the military dominance of the established powers and leading to more multipolar military world order. These complexities of the new world order and speed at which technologies are emerging have merged and now permeates the conduct of war at all the levels. The convergence of fourth industrial revolution, mostly dual-use technologies, is making possible smaller, smarter, lethal, and cheaper weapon systems, and they have fundamentally changed the character of war. Most noticeably, the decision time, bringing the OODA loop time down from 3 days in Gulf War to 2 hours in Kosovo War, 19 minutes in Afghan War, 5 minutes in Libyan War, and almost near real time in Syria. As the time to complete the OODA loop approaches zero, human cognition will simply be unable to keep up. In such battle space of 5-dimensional hyperwar, military forces must be able to respond rapidly and decisively. The window to influence such circumstances is increasingly fleeting, and rapid response, lethal or non-kinetic, is the primary characteristics of air power or aerospace power. I will use these terms interchangeably. This cannot be said about land or sea forces, both of which suffer from the tyranny of the time and distance. Therefore, the flexibility of response across a wide spectrum of circumstances is an air power strength. Air and space power gives the government the choice and ability to act and signal strategically at range and speed, precisely with minimum political risk and maximum political choice. The aeronautical school of thought, thus, is emerging more decisive and efficient than the continental and the maritime school. Thanks to this school, human beings will soon be a two-planet civilization. In any future scenario, aerospace power will be the choicest force to deter war and destroy an enemy's ability to fight, both in traditional and non-traditional threat spectrum. This superiority is largely attributed to rapid emergence of technologies, which has revolutionized its capabilities like artificial intelligence, UAVs, cyber warfare tools, stealth, directed energy weapons, small warheads, lethal autonomous weapons, precision standoff capabilities, space-based capabilities, array of networks, and information availability come superiority. Air power advantage will always be the technological advantage, which includes continuously integrating, demonstrating, and signaling new combat credible capabilities and operating procedures and operations that enhance lethality, reach, and resilience, deny benefits, impose costs, or complicate adversary strategy. Military historians observe the existence of sixth military revolution right now and identify technology as the root cause of this change. Exploring the effects of fourth industrial revolution on the present day sixth military revolution, it is not possible to get this answer without understanding the corresponding politics, economics, technology, doctrine, organization, and strategy. It is considered evolutionary change. It's big and beyond the scope of this session. However, more relevant to today's topic is revolution in military affairs framework under the umbrella of fourth IR, which identify changes attributed to technology, doctrine, organizational changes, and strategy. Wave after wave of new digital technologies is already crashing upon us and quickly becomes a question that will we be able to surf the next tech wave or we will be swamped? Parents live in a completely different digital world and the grandparents live in a previous version of their own digital world. It is all very unsettling and we see somehow less connected, even though we are constantly online with 24 hours cable news and social media. The key characteristics of fourth industrial revolution are twofold. One, the fusion of broad range of technologies across the physical, digital, and biological domain that converge, which fundamentally changes the way people live and work, and how government wage war. Two, according to Klaus Schwab, the dual-use technologies have resulted in empowerment paradigm shift in which long-standing formal institutions are ceding power to more informal and distributed forms, creating legal and ethical issues. The example of Uber, Facebook, and Airbnb in the on-demand economy show how businesses who have very little physical assets can generate massive quantities of wealth through ownership of information and digital platforms. The change is that the information and digital platforms require as much protection as physical assets, much like the traditional national security interest. This is cyber domain, the fifth domain of war, which has dramatically altered the way and means in which military commanders can prosecute their war. Cyber domain has given impetus to non-attributional warfare, which is an actor's employment of any means, may it be physical or digital, lethal or non-lethal, to achieve their objective with the deliberate attempt to dissociate the actor or activity from the responsible party. This is all enabled by the anonymizing tool of fourth industrial revolution. Considering the actual execution of air and space operations, the integration and coordination of resources of multiple domains in time and space is essential for mission success. So securing the cyber domains across which this coordination takes place is paramount. There has been growing recognition that air power is increasingly dependent on the cyber as well as space domains because of their ubiquity. The unity of effort in air, space, and cyberspace is the linchpin of multi-domain operations. I'll talk about cyber first. Cyber capability has enjoyed enormous success in stealing data and money, but much more varied results are there at the physical change or the physical damage. The Snowden files confirmed that China had penetrated Lockheed Martin's top secret data on F-35. Industrial espionage of military programs via cyberspace has been stated to be the part of what represents one of the largest transition of wealth in human history. All networks have nodes in the real world, like satellite downlinks, servers, and fiber optic networks. All lay vulnerable for cyber attack with great uncertainty. It is very effective to coordinate and mix cyber and air attacks. In fact, this is an area ripe for cross-domain exploitation. Cyberspace is about dominating the electromagnetic spectrum, from wired and unwired networks to radio waves, microwaves, infrared, X-rays, and directed energy. Use of the electromagnetic spectrum is essential to conduct warfare in every other domain. If a force can dominate the spectrum, it can severely limit or even defeat an enemy's effort in all other domains by making it difficult for an adversary to communicate with space assets. Networks are the new targets of degradation, disruption, or destruction. Russia was able to use EW to damage or destroy Ukrainian command networks, jam radios, radars, and GPS signals, and control fires. Miniaturization of electronics, massive increase in computer power, creation of electromagnetic pulse systems, and improved sensors are driving the EM spectrum to be a key area of high-tech competition, one that may well determine the outcome of future engagement. EM spectrum is actually a potential candidate for the six-dimensional aspect of warfare. Space. Space is the ultimate high ground. Most of the space technologies are dual use, which has resulted rapidly into democratization of space to include civil sector also. The word of space is a buzz these days with the phrases such as Space 2.0 or New Space revolutions, via a number of disruptive new technologies, systems, services that are offering new opportunities. The global space sector economy hovers around $630 billion, hovered around in 2023, and it is estimated that it will be 1.8 trillion by 2032. SpaceX has done the unthinkable, which was restricted to 3 world superpowers. Morgan Stanley predicted that space industry will create probably the first trillionaire. Space is indeed open for business. It is not a service provider now, but a complete war-fighting domain. Old space or space 1.0 contexts included mostly satellite communications, remote sensing, and satellite navigation, much funded and driven by their military potentials. However, new space or space 2.0 differs in a way that disruptive innovations have come to space domain, which offers Silicon Valley style startup mentality. Break through the cost barrier through economies of scale and efficient production. An open IT approach, commercial off-the-shelf softwares focused on end users' needs rather than technology. New disruptive approaches of SpaceX, Planet Lab, Hypergiant, and Space Chain satellite networks allow users to create their own space applications from anywhere in the world. On the military side, apart from intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and navigation services, long-range missiles use satellite guidance, satellite with EW payloads, payloads for cyber and information warfare, onboard placement of directed energy weapons, killer satellites like CubeSats, storage of more than 200 to 300 zettabytes of data from various domains for use by relevant network weapon systems through cloud, edge, or fog computing. To deny or negate space power to the adversary, innovative weapons of counter-space operations through laser dazzling, cyber attack, satellite command control jamming, direct energy weapon ASATs, orbital ASATs, direct ascent ASATs, ground site attacks, and exo-atmospheric nuclear attacks have significant impact on securing own celestial line of communications to support the instruments of national power. China's meteoric rise as a space power has been striking. Russia is also not lagging and is showing the space sector revival. US space policy has been the most consistent to strategic and military development. At present, there is no comparison between India and Pakistan's space program. The tremendous achievement made by India in its space program has given it the capability against Pakistan, in which Pakistan can do very little to hide its activities, which are strategically or tactically geared to bolster offensive or defensive operations. The space program requires long-term partnership and continuous assistance from collaborating countries until it matures. Space industries remains highly political and strategic in nature. This geopolitical dimension presents great challenge for our aerospace ambitions. Although space and cyber domains emerged from the third industrial revolution, but has never been fully contested during wartime, there are no lessons learned and no way to know how crippling, destructive it could be to modern society. Any and And any battle in these domains will actually destroy military's ability to fight in the more traditional domains of land, sea, air, and cyberspace. The single most, now I'll move from cyber and space to other important technologies which are impacting basically the revolution in military affairs. Not the military revolution, but the revolution in military affairs, which is basically the technology oriented only. The single most disruptive technology affecting aerospace power is artificial intelligence, which has transformed war from informatized to intelligentized war. Artificial intelligence plus human intelligence is a superior intelligence and has widely penetrated the combat field and transplanted to the weapon systems also. The diffusion of nanotechnology, additive manufacturing, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and drones have accelerated the evolution from informatized to intelligentized war, gradually expanding the combat space from physical domain and information domain to cognitive domain, and from tangible battlefield to intangible one. AI algorithms in C4ISR has made complex data from variety of AI-enabled early warning systems and other sources so useful to create real-time operational picture and accelerate, automate command and control processes. USAF concept of joint all-domain command and control system to exert all-domain as well as cross-domain deterrence is one of the examples. AI in robotics through computer vision, combat cloud, machine learning has actually helped revolutionize killer robots and lethal autonomous weapons, killer satellites and killer drones, making a pluralistic mixing of multi-pronged attack platforms, thus moving from integrated winning to cluster winning. Unmanned clusters have the advantage of large numbers and scale, low comprehensive cost, and decentralization. The concepts such as loyal wingman are also aimed at exploiting the realization of manned-unmanned cooperation. The proportion of unmanned equipment is increasingly manifold. For a reference on drone dependence, United States aerospace power exhibits manned to unmanned platform ratio of almost 1 to 1.5 in favor of unmanned. This is the return of the attribute of force mass back to the battlefield. Air littoral, from mobile ground-based air defenses, small drones, swarms, quadcopters, and other military-grade systems crowded the skies over Ukraine. Air superiority in the blue skies was once a prerequisite for Air Force to be able to freely operate specialized aircraft for other aerial missions. Today, however, air forces increasingly bypass the blue skies and instead access and exploit the air littoral. Houthi rebels employed a mix of military and commercial grade drones laden with explosives for precision strikes on Saudi oil fields, exploiting air littorals and decreased their oil production to almost half in 2019. Convergence of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and new energy generation technologies, including more efficient solar-based or fusion-based compact nuclear reactors, would enable future vertical lift systems and very long duration capable platforms, offsetting the disadvantage of impermanence of air power. Lockheed Martin is reportedly to be working on such systems. Another important disruptive potential is of metamaterials, which are synthetic nanostructured materials possessing special physical properties that enable the user to be invisible and to evade detection. Hypersonic weapons in the form of ICBMs, SRBMs, or cruise missiles, boost glide vehicles, offer rapid response at long ranges with increased maneuverability and better survivability. Theoretical possibilities do exist with regards to using space-based platforms for delivering a hypersonic weapon for a target on the ground. Russia, China, USA, and India have made considerable investment in developing hypersonic weapons. Defense against hypersonic weapons is difficult, as countermeasures both in terms of soft and hard options are still in the research phase. This makes the base air defense and other defense of the ground targets very difficult against hypersonic weapons. Blockchain technology is another powerful disruptor in transforming supply chain, logistics, and it's expected to provide most near-term, low-cost, high payoff applications in cybersecurity. These developments will impact the operational level of war, making the range obsolescence, loss of immunity to attack. In a hider-finder competition, nothing could now be really hidden, thus propelling defense to prominence. Non-lethal weapons that rely on directed energy weapons, lasers, acoustic vectors, and high-powered microwave systems suggest their systems will defeat drone and missile swarms. conventional aircrafts, glide bombs, and thus would reinforce the dominance of defense. The disruptive innovations in airspace and cyberspace domains are having a diffusive effect on air power, demanding new warfighting approaches. The future battlefield has been redefined where air power generate combat power not through platform-centric, but decision-centric warfare. These domains demand conduct of distributed operations through theater-wide networks. Mosaic warfare is one where machine-enabled control systems interact with the commanders and planners. Instead of a kill chain based on OODA, Mosaic warfare works on a kill web-based OODA loop. Since it is a web, it enhances survivability. To address the doctrinal, organizational, training, policy aspects of any induction of disruptive technologies or capabilities, we can do that by using the .mlpf framework, which I can explain later in our discussion. Clausewitz said that first, the supreme, the most far-reaching act of judgment that the statesmen and the commanders have to make is to establish the kind of war on which they are embarking. For air war, from doctrinal point of view, most important organizational change is the introduction of domain-specific commands, like cyber and space, to realize respective full domain capabilities. A quintessential organizational requirement in the 6th military revolution is the establishment of future warfare departments at all levels to research on the confluence of technology, of technological advancements that are rapidly changing the character of modern war. The future air strategy will have to grapple with the growing contest to occupy the air littoral, where drones and missiles for various types will be employed in massive numbers to saturate the airspace and wreak havoc and confusion on the adversary. Air forces will have to exploit the air littoral to own advantage across multiple mission sets and enforce air denial of littoral maybe through volumetric air defense concept. Based on this effect, Chinese A2ADE capabilities have actively denied projected air power employment capabilities of US 4th generation fleet. Stealth is the minimum cost of entry into A2AD threat environment. This volumetric concept of air control directs attention to critical differences between the blue skies where high-end air assets typically operate and the air littoral, bringing the air war closer to the ground fight, will not only resurrect past Army-Air Force disputes about service roles and missions, it will also place the Army and Air Force different concepts of control in conflict. The challenge of the air littoral calls for a rapid and forceful look at the doctrine, organization, training, and material, leadership and education, etc. As a paradigm in air superiority has emerged that is to maintain a constant all-domain and multidimensional state of alert, this was so crucial to Ukrainian operations that President Zelensky has called upon his country to produce 1 million new drones in 2024, and he hopes to receive another 1 million drones from NATO allies and partners. Options for Pakistan in this milieu. Setting aside geopolitical constraints from purely a new classic realist point of view, frail economy, low industrial base, weak private sector, and problematic civil-military relations, Pakistan may adopt a bottom-up approach from AI-led RMA perspective and not the military evolution perspective. If we are only confronting an RMA, then the challenge becomes more manageable and can be met within the current framework of defense. So as long as military maintains the ability to innovate, militaries will have to take the lead with max participation, what all is possible from private sectors. I think NESTAP being one example to steer our RMA trajectory in the right direction. Why I recommend AI-led RMA is because AI-related categories are applicable into nearly every aspect of air power, potentially shaping new forms of automated warfare by creating innovatively disruptive capabilities. Air Force must embed the notion of continual innovation into its organizational DNA. Small states like Israel, Singapore, and South Korea are following RMA-oriented approach to periodically adjust their defense arrangements to cope with the ever-changing strategic and operational conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, today's Air Force are developing their own and often diverse solutions to the technological issues. Their effectiveness will depend on many factors that are linked to the enduring principles of strategy, the ends, ways, and means, to convert available defense resources into novel capabilities and create and sustain Air Force with operational competencies to tackle a wide range of contingencies. Technology is a means to an end, not an end. It will not be technological innovation per se, but the combined effect of institutional agility to implement defense innovation, organizational expertise supported by sustained funding. For the future air power, this means having the people, processes, and systems capable of delivering innovation solutions while maintaining existing core capabilities. This is very important. War is a human endeavor, an art, a free and creative activity founded on scientific principles. If you want to create new ideas, it is said that look into the past. That's what Julio Dohe said a century back. And I quote what he said: "Victory smiles upon those who anticipate the changes in the character of war, not upon those who want to adapt themselves after the change has occurred." Thank you very much.
The air power in future would create effects, but not only employing the modern weapons, but with the advancement in technologies and innovations, the deciding factor would be the decision that one side could take better than the other and stay inside the Buddha's loop. With that crux of our keynote speaker in mind, I would now request Air Commodore Fawaz Zahir to kindly cover his part of the conference.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable President guests, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor to be speaking to this august gathering. The topic that was given to me was application and impact of air power in recent wars. The wars were four, however, all of these four wars are diverse and have ensued for quite some time, the shortest being the Palestine war, which has also gone on for more than 1 year. So instead of going through all of these wars, what I've done is that initially I'll contextualize the four wars, then I will go on to speak about different clusters. The first I will talk about strategies and then some important aspects that have emerged out of these wars, and then give some recommendations in the end. Now, character of war, strategy, and air power employment all are contextual. Whatever can work in one war may not be working in another war. So in order to understand what is going to work, we have to understand the context of each war also. In case we look at these four wars, war in Gaza, while technically being an interstate war, one of the belligerent has a regular army, the other one has no army. Syrian and Yemen war are essentially civil wars in which there is a lot of interference from external powers, and Ukraine war is an interstate war. I'll just briefly go over the belligerents in each war. In Gaza, it is Israel and Hamas. In Syrian war, it was initially Syria and Free Syrian Army. However, later on, Russia joined in to support Syria. Because of presence of ISIS in Syria, later on, USA and coalition forces also jumped in this war, and Turkey against the Kurdish. And recently, yesterday or day before yesterday, the American troops have now started to strengthen the local rebel groups against the Syrian army also. So the dynamics in this war are quite complex. In Yemen, again, it was Hadi forces which were loyal to President Hadi and Houthis which were fighting against each other. And then the Arab coalition came in to support President Hadi. Because of presence of Al-Qaeda, again, USA jumped into this conflict. And later on, once Houthis started their attacks in the Red Sea, USA started targeting Houthis as well. The blocks which are in blue are those parties which have a regular air force. The brown ones have only limited air power in terms of surface-to-surface missiles, UAVs, and limited air defense assets. And Free Syrian Army had some bit of ACX that were available to them. Once I talk about the political objectives, I will just talk about the objectives of those parties which have some bit of air power and which are utilizing air power for achievement of their political objectives. The political objectives are flashed. Now, with this background, I will now go on to discuss some of the strategies which have been employed in this war. The age-old fixation of air power with creating strategic effects by punishing the civilian population and breaking their will has been evident in all of these wars as well. Whether we see the genocide that has happened in Gaza, or the Saudi bombing of Sada governorates of Yemen, or the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria. The purpose of all of them was to punish the civilian population and force them to stop the war. However, as always, it has resulted in a humanitarian crisis and concerns of international humanitarian law. Practical utilization has not been that evident even in this context also. There were also other utilization of this strategy against the properties of the leadership also, which also did not yield much of the result. Punishment in systems framework was utilized by Russia by attacking the energy infrastructure, where the objective was that before the winters they strike the energy infrastructure, and because of that they freeze the Ukrainian population. However, this campaign was not that wholehearted that it could yield any result. We can go over its reasons later on. Then it was used to increase the cost on the state, which was the case of Yemen firing their missiles on the Saudi energy infrastructure and on their airports, because of which they were increasing the cost for the Saudis. And also the bombing that was carried out by Russians against Ukraine to target their economic structure, which did give some result, leading us to the question whether it is more effective against the developed state or a non-state actor which does not have that much at stake. And for those parties which are actually at war and those parties which are not at war, because Saudi Arabia technically is not directly involved in the war. So inflicting a cost onto that was likely to have more effects. The second was strategy of denial, which was used with a varied degree in all of the wars and had some effect. It helped to stop advance of rebel troops both in Syria as well as in Yemen. It was used against the Russian troops in the opening days with the help of TB2s and Ukrainian Air Force aircraft, which targeted the convoys which were stuck on the roads. And then we can also see that in this case, we saw that their defender had an advantage as far as denial of air was concerned, because of the manpads that the Ukrainians had, the Russian aircraft did not have that much freedom of movement, so that denial also played a role. And that resulted in denial of important air power roles, for example, strategic attacks and battlefield air interdiction and interdiction. Mostly they were concerned with close support which they could provide. Now I'll talk about various aspects one by one. First I will talk about the air defense, which emerged as the most prominent thing in all of these wars. The Free Syrian Army gained control of some of the shilkas that were there with the Syrian Air Force, and because of that they were able to inflict damage on some of the Syrian aircraft because they were not that advanced. However, once the Russians came in, those were not effective. The Saudi air defense against the Houthi missiles were affected, and they shot down hundreds of Houthi missiles. However, the problem was that the deployment of those systems to cover the entire area was quite challenging, and then the cost of each missile against the target, the incoming missile that they are targeting, was quite high. So because of that, those challenges also existed. In case we look at the Russian campaign, initially Russia carried out a sustained campaign against the air defense assets of Ukraine. In that, they used their electronic warfare also, the DIAD campaigns also, they struck their C2, and in the initial days, Ukrainian Air Force air defense was in a disarray. And in case we look at the missile engagement, the data that is there, initially the success rate was 10 to 16%, which rose to around 50 to 60% in later times. So because of that targeting of C2, there was quite an impact. However, the Russians were not able to sustain this campaign that they started. And the reason for that was, one of the reasons was that they did not conduct enough BDA, and most of, not most, but quite a lot of assets survived those attacks. And then they shifted on to manpads, and because of that, the challenge continued to increase. A concept that emerged in the Ukraine war, I don't know whether it was there or not, but mostly it has been discussed in the Ukraine wars, was that of air denial, where both parties were able to deny the use of airspace to the other party, where we continue to talk about 3 degrees of control of the air. This was a 4th degree which emerged in this war also and played quite a role. All of these wars highlighted importance of control of air and also the efficacy of opening campaign. The campaign has to be sustained, and in case you have to go from one phase to the other phase, you have to have the decision points there to shift from those campaigns. Leaving a campaign in between is not going to yield any result. And because of this air denial, the focus shifted onto surface-to-surface missiles and UAVs. The targeting strategy in Yemen that was followed by Houthis was to target the economic infrastructure, in which they targeted the oil facilities as well as airports as far as Abu Dhabi and Dubai also, although those have not been confirmed. And then they were targeting the oil facilities. The third target was military also, in which they targeted the coalition forces also and the Yemeni forces also. In case we look at Ukraine, in Ukraine, SSMs and UAVs are being used in tandem. I mean, the package contains ballistic missiles as well as cruise missiles and UAVs. And generally, the targets are all civilian infrastructure, economic infrastructure, communication infrastructure, as well as military infrastructure as well. Interestingly, Russians have used their surface-to-air missiles also in surface-to-surface role, and they have used their anti-sea missiles also in the same role, which some writers highlight that this is because of the shortage of the weapons that they had, the long-range weapons, because of which they had to switch to this strategy. The fixed-wing UAVs, the large UAVs that were used initially in this campaign was Orion by Russia and TB2, which made headlines in from the Ukrainian side. However, the utility of these UAVs in contested environment was again questionable, and a lot of TB2s were shot. After that, both parties shifted to low-cost UAVs, and these were the UAVs which were quadcopters off-the-shelf commercial, which could be controlled by radar, and they were used in almost all the roles. They were used for ISR, they were used for artillery guidance, they were used for dropping small payloads also. There was a lot of innovation in that, in which they say it is generally a cycle of 2 weeks, after which a new UAV or a new system comes up because of the development that is happening in the electronic warfare side. The attrition of these UAVs was very high. According to one report, in 1 month, 10,000 Ukrainian UAVs or drones were shot down. The general life cycle of a quadcopter is 3 sorties, and of a small fixed-wing UAV is 6 sorties. So the number of UAVs that are required for conducting these operations is quite high. So that is why there has to be a shift towards low-cost civilian drones, which are being produced by the civilian companies and are in large number. That is why, as Air Marshal Zulfikar said, 1 million are being ordered, but again, because of the attrition, probably they are not going to last that long also. The modes of countering used were generally electronic warfare, because the cost of to engage it with a missile was much higher than the cost of that particular platform. And this also brings us to the question of war reserves. If even Russia had challenges in maintaining its war reserves of surface-to-surface missiles and UAVs, then for countries like us, we have to think about it more. Next, we move on to the electronic warfare. It was used effectively by Russia in the opening days. Now again, we have to understand the context of this war, because initially Russia opened fronts from 2 or 3 directions. They were duly supported with electronic warfare also, and as I said in the case of air defense also, that they suppressed the enemy air defense. However, after that, they had problems of fratricide coming in, because all the theaters that were opened were quite wide. And because of this fratricide, they started to tone down their electronic warfare, because of which the efficacy reduced. However, subsequently, when they shifted towards the east, then they deployed their EW systems in about 10 systems in each 20 kilometers, and after that, the electronic warfare started to play a role in this war. The electronic support was used to locate targets, whether there was UAVs or radars, surface-to-air missiles, or the guidance systems. And electronic attack was used against air defense assets, satellite signals, communications, as well as against drones. And there was a continuous evolution. As I said, 2 weeks cycle, a drone was made, a counter was developed for that drone, and then the drone technology has to shift to the next steps. Again, emphasizing the role of the low cost and the civilian and indigenous capability for developing these systems. Talking about cyber warfare, it was used in all of these conflicts. However, the degree of their use depended upon the development state of that particular country. For example, in Yemen, the use was a bit less. In Syria, it was more. However, in Syria, it was mainly used for censoring the data, the communications of Free Syrian Army, and more of towards disinformation. In Gaza and Ukraine, it was used in a considerable way. However, in case we look at the previous Ukraine war, which happened in 2016, the use of cyber was quite significant. In this particular war, although the use of cyber was a lot, however, their effects actually could not be seen onto the battlefield. The way in which the cyber was used are as flashed. Destructive cyber attacks for deletion of data, disruptive for against the ICT, financial, and public service sectors, data weaponization for stealing of data, and disinformation attacks incorporating deep fakes with hacking of media. In Ukraine war, generally the cyber attacks were also done in conjunction with the kinetic attacks that were being done. And the example of the attacks on their TV broadcasting center, they were generally associated with the disinformation campaign in which the fake videos would be played from the Russian censors. There were some doctrinal issues on the Russian side also. Firstly, the Russians, their doctrine talked about active defense, in which they were not going that much offensive. However, the Ukrainian war that happened, they carried out an all-out offensive against another country. Their force disposition, their training, and all of these were according to active defense, which posed a challenge. Secondly, for almost 2 decades, the Russians had been talking about non-contact warfare. General Slipchenko and Grasimov, both of these were quite proponents of non-contact warfare, which involved more of the non-contact means and the information domain. But once the attack came, there was more of land forces that went in. So that was a dichotomy between their doctrine and what they actually did. And then the organizational structure of Russians was not very much aligned to the war that they were fighting. As they say that air is one, therefore air power should also be one. In the case of Russia, there was a dichotomy because their air power was assigned to military districts, because of this they were physically divided, and also their targeting was being dictated by the land forces. That caused air power not to be utilized optimally. One thing that I could not resist not mentioning was Boyd's way of war, but not in the context that Boyd is generally quoted in terms of OODA loop. I want to highlight the non-linearity, bifurcation, and adaptability that Boyd talked about. War is non-linear, and every stimulus that comes leads to bifurcation, and there's a need to adaptability. And it is here where you have to do the adaptability, where the OODA loop comes in. The planning that is normally done is done linearly, and it does not cater for each and every bifurcation, because of which they say that the first casualty of every war is the plan. So in this case also, the Russian plan was linear, and the first departure which led to a bifurcation was their departure from their original doctrine. Subsequently, once Ukrainian resistance came in and it did not succeed, there were multiple bifurcations that were taking place. However, the Russians did not take into account those bifurcations, and they continued to go along a linear path till the time they reached a place where they decided that it is not going to work, and then they had to pull out of Kyiv. And then the Russian organizational structure was also not well suited for a trans-level adaptability. even if at the tactical level they were able to adapt because of the hierarchical problems, they could not adapt or they did not adapt because there were no orders from the top. So again, as Boyd said, that the speed of OODA loop at the strategic level and tactical level is different, like a gear. So that has to be incorporated into the planning and war fighting as well. Some points to ponder: the missiles and UAVs. Again, I will link it with the A2AD strategy of China. A related concept with A2AD is the no man's land. If you have surface-to-surface missiles and let's say UAVs, because of that you can create a land where enemy forces cannot come in, same as China is doing. In Ukraine, we saw the air denial also, where this spread into the air also. In case we see the example of Iran, once Iran launched missiles against Pakistan, you have a threat in which there are multiple mobile launchers that are available. To cater for such a threat is one thing that probably we need to see as an Air Force, that in case there is such scenario, how does a balanced Air Force which relies more on aerial platforms respond to such threat? The second point is doctrine, adaptability, and multitude of threat scenarios. The CONOPS, the plans are made for one scenario. However, in war, as soon as the first bifurcation comes in, that plan, the hypothesis that we have made does not hold good. So how do we adapt to that in peacetime? And then the importance of low-end technologies, because we continue to talk of high-end technology, but what actually played in this war was the low-end technology, the low-cost drones, mobile phones. Even in cyber, it was the low cost. In case we even see the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, the S-300 was destroyed with the help of innovation and not high-end technology. So we need to see with our capability what are the low-end technologies that we can innovate and counter the high-end technologies. And then air power for strategic effects. It is a thin line. As I discussed earlier, utilizing air power for punishment does not work most of the time. Once we are using it for denial, we have to understand that what actually we are denying and not make air power subservient to the land forces in order to create that denial. So that is a thin line that we need to ponder upon. And then the question of short and swift war. At least two of the wars, Gaza war and Russian war, both of these cases, the power asymmetry was quite huge, and it was expected that it is going to be a short and swift war. Both of the wars, we have seen that they were not short. So while we continue to talk about short and swift war, are we going to fight a short and swift war in the future, or it is going to be a long protracted war? And once we talk of deterrence, deterrence may work, but does punishment work? If you punish India with a nuclear weapon, would that work, or would it cause a retaliation? So these are some of the questions that I had before. That is all from my side. Thank you very much.
Considering the diversity of objectives of the selected recent conflicts, it was difficult to club them together, and on top of it related to the air power. But the way Air Commodore Fawad Zahir has covered it, it's praiseworthy. I assume that the subject of air denial in Russia-Ukraine war and few other subjects will be discussed at length during our discussion session. Now, when all these innovations have taken place, let's consider that do we actually need to change the strategies related to the air power, or if we have to, what all changes should be made? When I was first introduced to the air power about 40 years ago, it had already matured and was 70 years old. We were taught that its characteristics are speed, range, flexibility, and ubiquity. Today, with the technological strides, while air power has been integrated with AI and autonomous weapons, cyber, space, UCAVs, and hypersonic weaponry, we find that the characteristics of air power are still the same. So, how have these innovations influenced the air power if the characteristics are the same? To tell you frankly, I believe that these all advancements are force multipliers. There would always be two or more opponents in warfare, and the winner would be the one which exploits these capabilities and basic characteristics of air power more effectively and better than the enemy. Thus, with the technological advancements, there is a need to modify strategies, policies, and even doctrines to be a step ahead of the opponent. Let us explore this argument for better understanding. Air superiority was required to attack enemy targets with minimum resistance to own attackers. In that bargain, the enemy defenses were to be neutralized and enemy aircraft were to be shot down in air and on ground for the safety of own aircraft. The air superiority is still required, but the way it can be achieved has changed dramatically. Now, the strategy to attack could be to undertake an intense cyber attack, crippling the enemy command and control systems, making the decision-making extremely difficult. An effective electronic warfare attack would be conducted to blind enemy aircraft in air, so no need to physically neutralize them, thus reducing the possibility of own attrition. Indeed, space-based assets would be utilized for intelligence, reconnaissance, and real-time attack support and assessment. So conclusion one is, air power, which was predominantly focused on gaining and maintaining air superiority and providing support to ground forces, with evolution of warfare, air power has become increasingly integrated with new capabilities like AI, autonomous weapons, cyberspace, etc., enhancing its role well beyond the support only, and this integration has led to the creation of new operational concepts and strategic frameworks. At this moment, two major questions arise. Number one, what are the possible changes required in the strategy related to air power applications in the modern world? Number two, what could be the suitable course of action for the developing nations which have limited resources but are eager to benefit from the integrated capabilities? Addressing the first question first, the possible changes in air power strategy. Air power strategies today must adapt to an increasingly complex and interconnected battle space influenced by emerging technologies, multi-domain operations, and hybrid warfare. The changes required in the strategy can be understood through some of the key considerations. The first amongst them is emphasis on multi-domain integration. The modern battlefield is no longer confined to air, land, and sea. It extends into cyber and space domains. Air power must align with integrated operations across these domains to achieve desired objectives. Like discussed earlier, gaining air superiority might involve disrupting an adversary's command and control systems through cyber attacks or leveraging space-based ISR assets for real-time intelligence. So, in a way, multiple sub-operations will have to be done in parallel, in unison. Mission planning, threat assessment, and target prioritization would have to be done through AI-driven algorithms, enabling faster and more precise decision making. UCAVs and autonomous platforms allow deep strikes and ISR missions in contested environments without risking human lives. Then is the prioritization of electronic and cyber warfare. The modern strategies must focus on achieving effects through non-kinetic means, such as jamming enemy communications, disrupting radar systems, and neutralizing air defense networks through electronic warfare. Cyber operations can paralyze the adversary's logistics, rendering their air and ground forces ineffective before a kinetic engagement even begins. Shift towards hypersonic. The integration, like mentioned earlier, the integration of hypersonic weapon system changes the entire calculus. These weapons, capable of reaching targets in minutes, require adversaries to rethink their defensive postures and force deployments. Next is agility and flexibility in doctrinal frameworks. The traditional air power doctrines emphasizing sustained campaigns must evolve to include shorter, high-intensity operations enabled by advanced technologies. The strategies must account for hybrid warfare, where conventional air campaigns may be combined with proxy conflicts, misinformation, and the economic pressure. The tempo of modern warfare necessitates real-time data analysis and decision-making. Artificial intelligence can analyze vast amount of sensor data to recommend optimal strategies, ensuring commanders can outpace the adversaries. So, the key adjustments that will have to be made: number one, strengthening resilience and redundancy by ensuring systems and networks which can withstand cyber attacks in electronic warfare. Then, developing the capabilities to detect and neutralize threats before they manifest fully. Excuse me. Coming to the second question, that what should be the course of action for the developing nations? Developing nations face the dual challenge of advancing their air power capabilities while managing constrained budgets. However, strategic choices can enable them to achieve significant gains. So what should they do? Focus on cost-effective technologies. Instead of investing heavily in expensive manned platforms, developing nations should prioritize UAVs and UCAVs for surveillance, reconnaissance, and even precision strikes. Indeed, a fine balance has to be maintained. The costly equipment does become a necessity depending upon the threat environment. Leverage commercially available technologies, particularly in AI and cyber domains, to develop indigenous capabilities. Establish partnerships with technologically advanced nations or regional allies to co-develop or acquire cutting-edge systems. Examples include joint production agreements or technology transfer arrangements. Multilateral frameworks can also provide access to space-based assets for ISR and communications. The developing nation can offset their technological limitations by focusing on strategies which provide more output with less input to offset asymmetry with the adversary. For example, investing in electronic warfare and cyber capabilities can neutralize advanced air power platforms of adversaries without even direct confrontation. Start small by focusing on specific areas like UAVs, loitering munitions, or AI-based analytics. Over the time, build capacity for large-scale systems. Incentivize private sector involvement in defense research and development to foster innovation and reduce the cost. leverage dual-use technologies. Many technologies have AI, satellite communication, like AI, satellite communications, and autonomous systems have both civilian and military applications. By investing in these dual-use areas, nations can benefit from economies of scale and shared resources. Prioritize the development of skilled personnel capable of operating and maintaining advanced systems. This includes establishing training programs and partnerships with international institutions. Adopt a phased approach to modernization. Focus initially on acquiring and deploying technologies that provide immediate operational benefits, such as ISR drones or electronic warfare equipment. Gradually, scale up to more sophisticated systems as the resources permit. Cyber and basic space capabilities are relatively low cost yet high yield domains. Investment in cybersecurity can protect critical infrastructure, while basic space capabilities can provide ISR and communication support. To summarize, here are few practical steps. Collaborate with private firms to develop low-cost UAVs and drones. Establish a cyber command capable of offensive and defensive operations. Participate in international space initiatives for shared satellite access. Utilize open source AI tools to develop indigenous applications for ISR and command systems. Build regional partnerships to pool resources for advanced capabilities like hypersonics and space access. To conclude, I would say that the integration of advanced technologies with air power presents both opportunities and challenges. For nations with robust economies, it is about staying ahead by continuously innovating and adapting strategies. For resource-constrained developing nations, success lies in prioritizing investments, leveraging partnerships, and employing asymmetric approaches to maximize the effects of their air power capabilities. Thank you very much. I will now request President CAS, Air Marshal Javed, for his vote of thanks and closing remarks.
Wayne, thank you very much. Let me first of all thank the speakers, Zulfikar, Air Marshal Zulfikar, Air Commodore Fawad, or Nasir Wayne, for a very, I think, discussion which is very close to our heart, being professionals in the same field. Plus, I would like to thank the audience, the learned audience, for being here and joining in the discussion. I think the young researchers, maybe some of them don't know the contributions, but almost everybody in this room has a lot of experience in our audience, and they've contributed in one way or the other to wherever Pakistan is right now. Air Marshal Wasim, I think Pakistan's strategic venture into the air element, he is one of the pioneers of that. So they all have a lot of contributions. So I want to thank all of them from, I think we are extremely fortunate to have all of you here. We'll continue to call you here. Now this incidentally is a series of talks. There's a series of talks to come to a conclusion because behind every talk there are many topics which come up. And as I told Fawad, you can't do justice to 4 or 5 conflicts in 15 minutes. This was just to scratch the surface and then look at deeper into what happened in all these. Because I think the mode of operation of how policy is implemented is almost standard now. If you have a problem with a nation, you start with a cyber attack, and the cyber is followed by an unmanned. And the sensitivity to both these has not developed because of the absence of laws. So our nations are not sensitive to cyber attacks like Pakistan. I think almost every bank, every institution is attacked. For unmanned, I think there are drones which continue to fly, and the sensitivity to drone warfare is much less than manned warfare or a pilot ejecting in enemy territory like it happened in the case of Abhinandan. So a lot of changes are coming in. I would just like हमारे ज़माने के जो concept थे hard and soft kill, तो soft kill तो is gone to cyber mostly, and as I said, the sensitivity is less and the hard kill options बहुत वो बढ़ गई हैं. I would just cite इतने conflict discuss किए हैं, but let's look at Yemen only. I don't know whether Yemen has an economy or not, whether they have a functional government or not, whether they have an air force or not, but the effects which those people have created, I think they are. From where are they getting the targeting information? How are they so accurate? How have they managed to target Saudi facilities right at the junction of oil terminals? How have their UAVs penetrated Israeli air defense? The best in the world. So there are a lot of lessons which you can draw from each conflict, which is different in nature. And I think it will take us a lot of time to discuss Ukraine, which we all hope comes to an end, and Palestine, which which is ultimately resolved. So there's a lot of study, and I want to thank our presenters once again for touching these subjects. If we talk of the future in terms of technology, there are many future topics which come up. Like, for example, space becomes one element, which I'm very sure must have been weaponized. We are not clear whether things have happened in space or not. And in times of, if you talk of technology, then you have quantum coming up, you have nano coming up. I think air-to-air combat may transfer onto UAVs in future. But I think in all these conflicts, one thing which has come up clearly is the potency of the air defense. I think it's an immense challenge to have a defense against so many unmanned systems which continue to proliferate the airspace. And if you look at a country like Pakistan and you imagine UAVs trying to target something, I think the entire airspace is open. So air defense also becomes a challenge, and I think this will be a part of one of our discussions in future. So in the end, let me thank all of you once again to have given us food of thought. I really enjoyed all the presentations, and you learn at all age, so learning never stops. So I personally learned a lot of things from these presentations in the discussion today. And I think CAS will follow up on this, because this is the bread and butter of CAS. So thank you very much once again.